Throughout the reign of King Henry VIII, 70,000 people were executed during the notorious Tudor king's time on the throne. Two of the most shocking executions included two of Henry's wives, and one of these was a woman that changed the face of English history forever. Despite not being married to Henry for a significantly long time, the marriage of Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn changed the country massively. But Anne Boleyn met her end in bloody fashion inside the walls of the Tower of London, on Tower Green, being beheaded by a French swordsman. Today Anne is considered a victim, and it's believed that there was little logic or justification for her death. She is perceived as one of the king's most high-profile victims, and her downfall was crafted by Thomas Cromwell, in which a web of lies was spun against her. Join us today as we look at the brutal execution of Anne Boleyn, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Anne Boleyn caused uproar and chaos across England. Henry VIII was becoming very tired and fed up with his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and she could not provide him with the son he greatly wished for. Catherine and Henry's marriage produced only one child that survived, the later Queen Mary I, or Bloody Mary. But Henry was desperate for a male heir, and he began to have his eye caught by Anne Boleyn. Anne arrived at court and was seen as a captivating young lady, and Henry quickly made advances towards her, despite still being married. Anne rejected him a number of times, and this was incredibly frustrating for him, and Henry was forced to wait until he had sorted out an annulment with Catherine. Both Anne and Henry exchanged gifts, but the king's great matter plagued him, and it was a time where no one could get a divorce, let alone a king. Catherine of Aragon, his first wife, was a proud Catholic European regent, and she believed her marriage with Henry was sacred. Henry tried everything to erase his and Catherine's marriage, as he dreamed of Anne Boleyn. Henry tried to appeal to the Pope for a divorce or an annulment, and he even said he'd sinned by marrying his dead brother's wife. The Pope would not give up, and he banned Henry from marrying again until the decision came about his first marriage. Cardinal Wolsey was ordered to get a solution and to get the king his divorce, but Wolsey could not do this, and he also fell from grace, but passed away before he could have been executed. But Henry took action into his own hands, and in 1531 he banished Catherine from court and took her royal chambers and quarters away and gifted them to Anne Boleyn. This was seen as disgraceful, and it caused chaos across England, and Anne was almost nearly seized by an angry mob at one point. Henry allowed Anne to perform many of the roles a queen would, even despite not being one, and she was given a peerage which made her very rich and also benefited her family, with the Boleyns becoming incredibly powerful and wealthy. Anne was the apple of Henry's eye, and she was married to the king in secret on the 14th of November 1532, and it's alleged she then became pregnant after this. There was a second wedding, but then a trial decreed that Henry's marriage to Catherine was in fact a sin and invalid. 5 days after, the marriage of Henry and Anne was declared valid, and Catherine of Aragon was stripped of her queenship. Anne Boleyn was crowned Queen Consort on the 1st of June 1533 at a large ceremony at Westminster Abbey. It was clear that Anne was pregnant. There was hope that she would give birth to a son and a new heir to the throne, but following the ceremony, she was paraded throughout the streets, but large amounts of the population disliked her. The Pope excommunicated Henry because of this, and he condemned the marriage of Henry and Anne, and the Pope tried to cause more issues. The king forced all of his advisers and close friends to accept the act of succession, and also that Anne was the rightful queen, and forced them to turn their back on the Pope. A number of Henry's closest friends and advisers, such as Thomas More, could not accept this, and they paid for this with their lives. It was said that Henry was also the supreme head of the church, and that he had authority on the church within England and not the Pope. This religious turmoil was caused all by Anne Boleyn's marriage with the king, but Anne also began to acknowledge Protestantism and promoted this within her court. But Anne was then sent to Greenwich Palace to await the birth of her child. There was much hope that this was a son, but a daughter Elizabeth was born, and despite Elizabeth going on to become one of the best queens England has ever had, this was not what the king wanted. This disappointed Henry VIII, but he was prepared to try again for the male heir. Anne was seen as a lavish spender at court, and she had a number of household staff that performed different roles, and even had 60 maids of honour. Her and the king's relationship was happy, and she oversaw court spending large amounts of money on luxuries and decorations. But Henry was obsessed with his desire for a son, and following a miscarriage in 1534, Henry discussed the idea of divorcing Anne Boleyn for the first time. He had spoken to Cranmer and Cromwell about this, but then the idea disappeared for a while. Anne became pregnant yet again, and continued to hope for a son that would get her out of immediate danger, but the king began to grow tired of her. As Henry had broken from Rome, he was free to do as he pleased, and this would have made Anne's position rather tenuous and uneasy. It was around this time that Henry began to look towards Jane Seymour, one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting. He gifted Jane a locket with a portrait of them both inside, and Jane wound up Anne by continuing to open and close this whilst in her company. Anne was so angry that she ripped this off Jane and cut her fingers doing so. But around this time, Henry had a very horrible jousting accident at a tournament where he was knocked out for 2 hours, and it's believed that the stress of this caused Anne to miscarry a baby that many believed was a son. When Henry later recovered, this was the start of the end for Anne and Henry. Henry, driven by the desire for a male heir, was fed up with the miscarriages Anne had, and he said he fell under her witchcraft and spells, and because of this she was forced out of the royal apartments. Henry then put Thomas Cromwell to task to get him to find a way out of the marriage. Cromwell crafted an expert web of lies and deceit against Anne Boleyn, which saw her being accused of treason, incest and adultery with a number of other men. Cromwell used all of his experience of Tudor politics to target Anne at court, and he interrogated those on the periphery of Anne's circle, and he managed to get evidence that he believed could bring the Queen's downfall. A number of men were arrested, including her own brother George. All of the men accused were executed in bloody fashion, including her brother, and Anne was indicted on charges and was taken to the Tower of London on the 2nd of May 1536. When she arrived at the prison, she broke down asking for her father. She was tried along with her brother inside the Tower of London, and all of those accused, including Anne, were sentenced to death. Anne's trial was a sham, and all of the evidence it's believed was false and manufactured. The men accused with her were executed on the 17th of May 1536 on Tower Hill, but it was said that Anne inside the tower was at peace with her impending death. She could have been burned at the stake, but the king commuted her death sentence to a simpler beheading, fetching a French swordsman to perform the execution, as he believed it would be more reliable. On the day of her execution, the constable of the tower, William Kingston, wrote, "This morning she sent for me, that I might be with her at such time as she received the good Lord, to the intent I should hear her speak as touching her innocency, always to be clear." It was said that Anne said, "I heard say the executioner was very good, and I have a little neck," and then she put her hands about it laughing heartily. "I have seen many men and also women executed, and they have been in great sorry, and to my knowledge this lady has much joy in death." Before dawn, on the 19th of May, she had called the constable of the tower to hear mass with her, and she prayed she had never been unfaithful to the king. She was given the sacrament, and she was told to ready herself, as the executioner was waiting. She left the royal apartments inside of the tower, and was surrounded by 4 servants, who followed Kingston to the scaffold at 9 o'clock. She was dressed in a red petticoat, and was joined by 2 female attendants, making her final walk from the Queen's house to the scaffold. It was said that she seemed positive, then she made a short speech on the scaffold. Anne Boleyn was allowed to be executed in private inside the Tower of London, being spared the eyes of the public on Tower Hill. But there were a large number of people who were there to witness the beheading of the Queen. Anne said to the crowd, "Good Christian people, I am come hither to die, and therefore I will speak nothing against it. I am come hither to accuse no man, nor to speak anything of that whereof I am accused and condemned to die. But I pray God save the king, and send him long to reign over you. He was ever good, gentle, and sovereign Lord. This I take my leave of the world and of all you, and I heartily desire you all to pray for me. O Lord, have mercy on me. To God I commend my soul." It was said that her speech had a profound effect on the crowd, and her voice wavered in weakness at times. Anne made a number of people cry, and then her ladies prepared her for her execution. She thanked her women for their service and told them to pray for her, and the executioner then asked for his forgiveness, and Anne handed him a sack of coins as payment. One of her ladies then placed a blindfold over her eyes, and she knelt and said her final prayers. She seemed dazed as she knelt on her knees in the straw, and she faced the crowd and said, "O Christ, receive my spirit." She did look scared, and her women then began to cry at the scenes. Within seconds, a few more prayers were said, and then the executioner unleashed his sword from a lump of hay to gasps in the crowd. In one blow, he struck Queen Anne Boleyn's head clean off, and she lost her life. Her head fell into the straw, and it was covered by a white handkerchief, and cannons along Tower Wharf fired, marking the execution of Anne Boleyn. Thomas Cromwell was even there himself to witness the proceedings, and then her head and body were taken by her ladies to dispose of it. They placed her body and head in an arrow chest, and this was then taken inside the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula for burial. Anne Boleyn's death and execution was incredibly sad and was manufactured expertly by Thomas Cromwell, and it was incredibly shocking. Her downfall was linked with failed pregnancies and the fact she could not produce a son that Henry VIII wanted so badly. But it's ultimately the king's wandering eye that secured her downfall and death. Today she's seen as a tragic second wife of King Henry VIII and a victim of the king's brutal side. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.